There have been a variety of adaptations written in time periods of over 300 years of the story Beauty and the Beast. Through evaluating the short stories from The Bloody Chamber written by Angela Carter, written in 1979, and the latest film adaptation of Beauty and the Beast, released in 2017, it is clear that the context of the text largely impacts on its content and cultural values. The short stories, written by Angela Carter, are retellings of the classic tale, but they are darkened and purposely intended for more mature audiences. Carter took a lot of her inspiration from Beaumont's original publishing of the story, but made her adaptations differ vastly from the original. She focuses more on the transformation aspect of the story and discusses the misogyny of men and the growth of womanhood. She also openly comments on the virginity and innocence of women and how gender constructs can change and shape this. Carter was American-born and grew up in a very refined society in which she was sheltered from a lot of the social and political issues going on around her. As she matured and adapted to a life of her own, she became aware of the world forming around her, and decided to put these issues into her writing, forming early starts of her feminist-based work. Carter's writing demonstrates her cultural values as she feels very strongly about the topic of feminism and a woman's place in society. As Carter's adaptation was written during the 21st century, it holds many of the popular beliefs and values of a modern woman. Carter's perspective on love, marriage, and fidelity is woven into her work, but she still references many of the social beliefs that were held during the time that the original version of the story was published. This creates a series of short stories which are able to adapt to their modern context, while still being able to comment on the social and cultural beliefs that were held in the 18th century. In the story of The Courtship of Mr. Lyon, Carter comments on the childlike innocence of the character of Beauty. She is untouched by love and is depicted as a virgin-like character that still holds all of her innocence. She is bewitched yet terrified of the Beast in this story. As he is a lion, she then compares herself to a lamb. This portrays Beauty as viewing herself as a weak character in comparison to the Beast. Carter proceeds to highlight the power of men have over women and comments on their ability to objectify the female body. His beauty, his girl, his child, his pet. The repetition of the pronoun his emphasizes and indicates Beauty's father's possession he holds over her, as he still views Beauty as being dependent on him, as the word pet implies the ownership he feels over her. As the love between Beauty and the Beast grows, they become more equal. She no longer refers to herself as a lamb, but as a cat, as she transforms from a girl into a woman, as Beauty loses her virginity to the Beast, thus losing her innocence. And then it was no longer a lion in her arms, but a man. Beauty was able to break through the Beast's facade to reveal his escape from the masculine gender constructs due to her innocence that she had placed upon him. This juxtaposes the small amount of power women had during the 18th century and how, in a modern context, women are allowed to want equality in their relationships and are able to do so. Carter transforms this past view into a modern context, although she does still touch on the fear of a misogynistic relationship, much like the ones in the 18th century, where women were treated as objects instead of human beings. The Tiger's Bride, also written by Angela Carter, is narrated from the character of Beauty rather than a third-person point of view like most of her stories. Although the character of Beauty is never distinguished, it is obvious to assume that it is she who is narrating. Contrasted from previous portrayals of Beauty, in this story she is not depicted as an innocent character, rather a wiser and more resilient, independent character. In this retelling, it is not Beauty's choice to be imprisoned to sacrifice herself to her father. My father lost me to the Beast at cards. This very openly expresses the sense of ownership men still had over women, and it shows the oppression and inequality many women suffered from, and what little power and control they had over their lives. The symbols of innocence are tainted compared to previous portrayals of this character. Ripped petal by petal apart. The white rose is symbolic of love, purity, and innocence. Beauty metaphorically begins to rip apart the petals to represent her loss of purity. This violent imagery in the word ripped shows the severity of her loss of innocence, as it is something that is seen to be extremely precious and can be taken away for women so easily. The Beast asks to see Beauty undressed, and if she does so, he will return her to her father. My master's sole desire is to see the pretty young lady unclothed, nude without her dress. Beauty openly refuses his request, as she is a strong female character who does not withhold her independence. The open request to see this young girl naked to begin with highlights the objectification of women, as without her clothes she is just a sexual object rather than a human being. Beauty remarks she will let him only see an ankle, and she must be immediately sent to a church to be cleansed. During the 18th century, religion was very strongly held for almost the entire population. The idea of being pure and modest for a woman is evident here, as beauty demands she must be cleansed from her sin of showing a small portion of her body to a man. It is present here that Carter highlights on the modesty of women in the 18th century, but in doing so, she creates a female character with more independence, as in no way is she forced to remove her clothing. It is simply a request in which she rejects. Beauty continues to reject the Beast's request until he removes his mask to reveal he is a tiger dressed in human's clothing. He paced out the length and breadth of his imprisonment. As the Beast unmasks himself to reveal his true identity, it distracts him from being a powerful and dominant character, and portrays him to be a gentler being, as he wants to escape from himself. Instead of scaring Beauty, this comforts her, as she is able to see the Beast as more humane, as he is in his natural state. Beauty then proceeds to lose her virginity. My rose had lost all of its petals. This reiterates that sexuality is one of the only things women could control, although men were still largely seen as the dominant figure in sexual relations. Carter then suggests that women should and need take control of their sexuality. The lamb must learn to run with the tigers. This metaphor implies that as Beauty has learnt to accept and take control over her sexuality, Carter expresses her own views through Beauty and aims to end the gender construct of women being the submissive figure and men being the predator in relationships. Beauty's character conveys a modern woman's abilities to realize her own power. He was far more frightened of me than I was of him. This rejects the concept of women being passive among society and shows the realization of men's insecurities behind the patriarchal constructs. Unlike previous adaptations of this story, Beauty is not left to an idealized perfection, but is seen as a resilient, independent, and strong-willed woman. Contrastingly, the Beast is portrayed as a fragile character, despite previous character portrayals. Carter revolutionizes these fairy tales into stories that appeal and adapt to a modern context and comment on women's roles in society. The Beauty and the Beast film, which was written somewhat 20 years later than The Bloody Chamber, failed to achieve the same level of revolutionized concepts of feminism. Although the film was advertised to have had a complete feminist retelling and is also written in the third wave of feminism, it did not pursue that claim as expected. The film is an adaptation of the 1991 Disney film and was not directly appropriated from its original French text, La Belle et la Bête. The film notably did give the character of Belle a more confident and self-driven personality compared to the previous portrayals of this character as a damsel in distress. It is clear that there has been some character growth and development, and a clear sense of strength in female empowerment over the last 300 years of this story existing. However, in a 300-year time period, there should have been more of a significant growth in female empowerment and feminist values. The film supposedly was meant to be a feminist adaptation, mainly because the character of Belle, played by Emma Watson, decided not to wear a corset or have a cinched waist, as a lot of the previous portrayals of female Disney characters have conveyed an unrealistic body standard for young women. However, female characters have not been wearing corsets or body-framing clothes for some time now, and there was more expected from such a fabricated film concept. The adaptation entailed that it was meant to represent the character of Belle in a new light, and showcase a stronger female character. However, the film being produced in a contemporary society, the audience awaited a film that represented the persona of a modern woman stuck in an unprogressive society. But all they managed to get Belle to do was invent an early stage of a washing machine, which consequently aided to her expected domestic view of an 18th century woman. This adaptation was written to escape the previous criticisms of Stockholm Syndrome, which is present in the earlier film adaptations, and the concept of male dominance in relationships. The film fails to subvert both of these concepts and instead uses them as key themes throughout the film. The concept of male dominance is repeatedly shown. Belle is the most beautiful girl in the village. That makes her the best. There is severe emphasis and high modal language in the dialogue of the words most, makes, and best, demonstrating that beauty made a woman desirable, and women were only considered to be worthy and of value if they were perceived as beautiful. Dominance in relationships and in physical strength is repeatedly portrayed by the male characters. The character of Gaston praises Belle because she is the most beautiful girl, therefore that makes her the best, which further highlights on the ideals that women were faced with. Although this comment is prodding fun at the character of Gaston and highlighting his stereotypical attitudes towards women, it would seem more fit to completely change this perception of male dominance into one that differs vastly from its original, rather than keeping the same misogynistic values. For a woman, it was seen unnatural or unheard of to read, as women were forbidden to read for quite some time, resulting in unbelievable inequality and injustice. The one thing this film does well is make the character of Belle a well-read and well-spoken woman, which was almost unheard of for this time. But she's so well-read and you're so athletically inclined. However, it would be refreshing to see the character's attitudes towards women to change, rather than still repeating the same morals of inequality among genders. This adaptation is complex in deciphering whether or not it truly is a feminist tale or if it is just repeating the past values. In contrast to Angela Carter's retellings of this story, in some ways Carter represented a more modern portrayal of this character in a less contemporary society, somewhat 30 years ago, compared to this modern adaptation written and released only 1 year ago from today. It seems time to create a story which captures what it is to be a woman, and to completely reject the misogynistic and unjust stereotypes women were faced with on a regular basis. Now being in such a modern world, there should be more expected from creators, as young women desperately need true feminist role models that completely reject previous ideals and expectations.